Sorry, ma'am, but there seems to be a mix-up with your seat. We'll need you to vacate this one. The words sliced through the silence of first class, sharp and cold as a blade. The Boeing 787 of North Star Airways had just completed boarding. The cabin glowed under the warm golden lights reflecting off the leather seats, every detail designed to whisper luxury. Yet no one in seat 1A felt comfortable because the woman sitting there, Olivia Carter, 57 years old CEO of Carter Dynamics, had just lifted her gaze, her eyes cutting through the air like glass. Her salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed. Her face bore the quiet strength of 3 decades in the battlefield of business, and the platinum ring on her hand gleamed faintly as she tightened her grip on her ticket. Her voice was low and steady, yet each word struck like a hammer against steel. "You said vacate this seat." In front of her, Kelly Adams, the lead flight attendant, forced a professional smile. She bowed slightly polite to the point of arrogance. "Yes, ma'am. There's been a small issue with seating. A VIP passenger. Mr. Charles Whitman usually occupies seat 1A on this route. The airline kindly asks if you'd move to seat 3C. Of course we'll refund the price difference. Refund the price difference." The phrase hit Olivia's ears like an insult wrapped in courtesy. She inhaled slowly, glancing at the seat beside her, empty, spotless, perfectly arranged, and the man standing in the aisle. Charles Whitman, grey suit, gold watch with an expression caught somewhere between embarrassment and entitlement, said nothing. He only shrugged as if to say, "This sort of thing happens." A line of passengers stood waiting in the aisle, faces a mix of curiosity and discomfort. A middle-aged man whispered to his wife. She probably sat in the wrong seat. The woman nodded, her voice low, but not low enough. "Look at her clothes. She doesn't look like a VIP." In that moment, Olivia felt a familiar weight settle in her chest, a cold, heavy, slow feeling that had followed her for 30 years, being judged before she ever had the chance to speak. She raised her head, her tone calm but edged with steel. "I am a platinum member of this airline 12 years straight. I booked this seat 3 months ago. Is there something wrong with that?" Kelly's lips tightened. "There's no mistake, ma'am, but Mr. Whitman is a guest of North Star's executive board. They made a special request. We hope you'll cooperate, the airline will." "No," Olivia interrupted. Just one word, sharp and final, freezing Kelly in place. "There will be no cooperation. I paid for this seat. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. Maybe you should ask yourself why your company thinks the person who should move is me." The air in the cabin turned thick and motionless. Even the hum of the engines outside seemed to vanish. At the far end, a young flight attendant, Tiana Brooks, the same woman who had met Olivia earlier in the lounge, stood frozen, her eyes wide. She recognized that look, anger restrained by dignity, pain held behind poise. And in it, she saw herself months earlier, when a passenger told her she didn't look qualified to serve first class. She had smiled through it then, only to cry later in an empty galley. Now she was watching the woman she could one day become someone strong enough not to bow. "Call your supervisor," Olivia said, her voice dropping even lower. Kelly blinked. "Ma'am, do it, and note down the names of everyone involved in this special request. My company spends over $2 million a year on North Star flights. I believe this case is worth recording." No one breathed. Charles Whitman, trying to look harmless, gave a nervous laugh. "Please don't misunderstand. I usually sit in 1A, so maybe the airline made a mistake." "Yes," Olivia said evenly, her gaze locked on him. They made a mistake. But the question is, whom did they mistake? A few minutes later, Captain Scott Mitchell appeared tall and composed, his eyes sharp. "Is there a problem here?" Kelly quickly recounted the situation, carefully avoiding the phrase asking to give up a seat. The captain looked at both passengers, then down at the manifest. "Mrs. Carter, correct." "My apologies, there seems to be some confusion from headquarters. Mr. Whitman's seat 2C is available, same space, similar comfort. I hope you'll understand." Whitman's face stiffened, but under the captain's firm tone and the weight of dozens of watching eyes, he forced a smile. I don't want to cause trouble." As he moved toward 2C, Olivia caught the exchange of irritated looks between Kelly and Paul, another attendant, as if they were the ones wronged. The plane hadn't taken off yet, but inside Olivia, a storm had already begun. It wasn't about the seat. It wasn't about a minor incident. It was about realizing she had stayed silent for far too long. For years she had chosen restraint, believing things weren't worth making a scene over. She had focused on her work, on meetings, projects, shares and reputation, convincing herself that success alone would be her answer. But here, beneath the sterile light of the cabin, she finally understood. Success doesn't make people respect you unless you're willing to stand up for yourself. When the captain left, Kelly lowered her head, forcing a smile. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Mrs. Carter." Olivia's reply was calm, her smile razor-thin. "No, you're not sorry for the inconvenience. You're sorry because you picked the wrong person to test." Kelly's throat tightened. The cabin froze in uneasy silence. The plane began to taxi, the engines roaring louder. At the front of the cabin, Tiana stood with tears glistening in her eyes, but a faint, proud smile on her lips. She had just witnessed something rare, a black woman not only keeping her seat, but holding on to the dignity of everyone who had ever been told to stand up and leave. Olivia closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. The soft cabin lights fell across her face. Outside, the aircraft climbed into the night sky. But within Olivia Carter, another journey had just begun, a journey to reclaim the true meaning of power, not in a first-class seat, but in the courage to remain seated when the world insists you should stand. And somewhere in that glowing cabin, amid the hum of engines and the hush of breathless onlookers, everyone knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Not a difficult passenger, but the quiet birth of a storm called justice. The early morning sky over Seattle looked like a wet sheet of mist. From the 38th floor of Carter Dynamics headquarters, Olivia Carter stood by the wide glass window, holding a steaming cup of mint tea. Below the city was slowly waking up golden lights rippling across the water, distant car horns echoing faintly through the cold fog. She was used to this view. For 30 years, every morning began with the same feeling, standing higher than everyone else, yet emptier than anyone could imagine. The glass door behind her slid open. Lauren Perez, her assistant, entered briskly, carrying a thick stack of documents. "Good morning, Olivia. The board meeting's been moved to 11. Rob said the quarterly forecast needs another review. And Jason sent the revised file for the London plan." Olivia didn't turn around, still looking out at the city. Lauren nodded. "Yes, he wants to discuss the new timeline for the London office." "Oh, and Megan from PR, she needs your approval on the Forbes interview." Olivia sighed, setting her teacup down. Another from garage to billion-dollar empire story. Lauren gave a cautious smile. That kind of story sells. People love tales of triumph. Olivia turned her gaze sharp as a blade. "Well, I don't. The past doesn't need makeup. It's something I lived through, not something to entertain others. Lauren paused, then nodded softly. I'll tell Megan to rewrite it. Focus on vision, not biography. Exactly. Tell her I'll talk about technology and the future, not about the doors that once slammed in my face. The phone rang. The screen lit up David Carter. Olivia hesitated for a beat before answering. Hi, darling. His voice was deep and warm, but tinged with fatigue. You remember dinner with Emma tonight, right? Olivia was silent for a few seconds before exhaling quietly. I have a 6 o'clock flight. London moved the meeting earlier. On the other end, silence stretched out. Again, Liv David's voice wasn't angry, just filled with that same quiet sadness. This time it's dinner with our daughter. We've had it on the calendar for 3 weeks. I know. But if I don't fly tonight, we'll lose an entire quarter's momentum. You understand this project, I understand. I always understand. David interrupted his voice, gentle but weighted. I just wonder if you do. Olivia sat down, her hand gripping the edge of the leather chair. What do you mean? I mean, for 30 years, you've always had a reason to be absent. A meeting, a partner, a crisis. And each time you lose something small, a dinner, a celebration, a birthday, until there's nothing left for us to lose. His words cut straight through her chest. Olivia swallowed hard. You're exaggerating. I'm just trying to keep everything together. For Emma's future. For our family. Olivia David said softly. We don't need a hero who sacrifices everything. We just need a wife, a mother, someone who can sit down and have dinner once in a while. His tone faltered for a moment, then steadied. Who's flying to London with you this time? The team. Rob, Lauren, and Olivia paused, and Jason David asked, Are you jealous? Olivia gave a faint, deflective laugh. No, just curious. The man who texts my wife at midnight about strategic innovation ideas. I'm curious, that's all. You're being unreasonable. And you're being naive. His voice stayed calm, but there was something like a quiet warning beneath it. I've seen the way he looks at you. Everyone has. Everyone except you, or maybe you just pretend not to. The silence between them thickened. Finally, Olivia spoke, her voice hoarse. What do you want from me, David? I want us to talk when you come back from London. Really talk. Not about the company, not about contracts, just about us. If there's still an us, then the line went dead. Olivia set the phone down, her eyes landing on the glass wall where a framed magazine cover hung, The Woman Who Changed Cybersecurity. She used to feel proud of it. Now it only made her feel tired. The door opened quietly. Lauren stepped in, her tone careful. The meeting starts in 5 minutes. Rob's waiting. Olivia stood, smoothing the sleeves of her grey suit. All right. The conference room on the 40th floor gleamed under bright white lights. At the head of the table, Olivia spoke clearly, each word precise and firm. The London project will increase our European market share by 30% within 18 months. If we stay on schedule next quarter, Carter Dynamics will surpass SafeLink and SkySec. On the big screen, the chart soared upward. Heads nodded around the table. Rob Hayes, the CFO, spoke up. The plan looks promising, but the risks are significant. Brexit staffing, costs, legal volatility. All manageable, Olivia cut in. With the right team, we won't just expand, we'll define the market. From the far end of the table, Jason Miller smiled confidently, eyes fixed on Olivia. I'll handle the initial phase in London. The key contracts are ready, and if you agree, I can stay a few extra days after launch to stabilize the team. Olivia glanced at him, catching the faint warmth in his gaze. David's words echoed in her mind. Everyone sees it except you." Her reply was cool. "No need. We're here to work, not to take vacations." The room fell silent. Jason pressed his lips together, masking his disappointment. When the meeting ended, Lauren approached. "The car's waiting to take you to the airport. Your ticket's confirmed." "And?" She hesitated. Emma texted. "She hopes to see you tonight, even just for 5 minutes." Olivia stopped a faint ache tugging at her chest. She opened her phone, staring at the unread message. "Mum, dinner's at 7. Please don't cancel again." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed, then deleted. Typed again. Deleted once more. "Mum's sorry, sweetie. London can't wait." But she didn't send it. She couldn't. The sleek black car rolled out from the Carter Dynamics tower. In the rearview mirror, the building with the silver CD logo grew smaller and smaller. Olivia leaned her head against the seat, her eyes heavy. Outside, the city lights flickered to life. Inside her, the only light left came from fading memories, the sound of Emma's laughter as a child, the times David waited outside her office just to have dinner together. All of it traded away for power, for prestige, for the first-class seat she was about to lose. When the car stopped at the airport, Olivia took her boarding pass. She didn't know that just 6 hours later the words, "Sorry, Mom, you'll have to change seats," would turn her entire world upside down, and would finally force her to see her life not from the 38th floor, but from the very seat where she was told she didn't belong. A light drizzle began to fall over the airport roof. Olivia looked up at the grey sky. She couldn't tell whether she was leaving to expand her company or to begin a revolution she herself couldn't yet name. The soft click of high heels sounded on the polished wooden floor of the North Star First Lounge. The scent of oak blended with the thick aroma of espresso, and the soft golden light spread evenly across the space, making it feel more like an exclusive private club than an airport waiting area. Olivia Carter walked in, pulling her suitcase, a polite smile briefly appearing on her lips. She never allowed anyone to see her exhaustion. For Olivia, image was strategy, and composure was a weapon. The receptionist checked her ticket, his gaze pausing for a moment when he saw the name, Olivia Carter, Carter Dynamics Incorporated. Then his demeanor shifted instantly as he bowed with practiced warmth. "We wish you a pleasant flight, Mrs. Carter. The bar is on the right, and the private rest suites are at the end of the hallway. Thank you." Olivia nodded, walking between rows of soft brown leather seats where expensive suits and designer luggage lined up neatly. She chose a spot near the glass wall, took out her laptop, and reopened the slide deck for the upcoming meeting in London. On the screen, the title appeared clearly, European Expansion Plan, Phase 1. That phrase shone like a guiding light, yet inside Olivia, that light felt dimmer than ever. At the table beside her, a white man in a grey suit was speaking to another receptionist. His voice was deep, carrying the casual authority of someone used to giving orders. "As usual, I want seat 1A, and I want to pre-check my carry-on before boarding." The receptionist bowed slightly. "Yes, Mr. Whitman, I have made a note." Olivia looked up. That name Whitman would cling to her flight like a bad omen. He turned away, his eyes sweeping past her, as if she were nothing more than part of the background of the room, a glance that was not intentional, but full of assumptions. Olivia knew that look well, the same look she had faced throughout her career, walking into conference rooms full of men, signing million-dollar contracts, while still being asked, "Which department do you work in?" She drew a long breath and returned to the plan. Everything had to be perfect. London was not just expansion, it was the rebirth of Carter dynamics after 2 years of market turbulence. "Excuse me, Mrs. Carter," a small, slightly trembling voice. Olivia looked up. A young North Star flight attendant stood in front of her fingers, gripping a coffee tray. Her face was round her brown skin, smooth her curly hair, pinned neatly into a bun at the nape of her neck. "I am sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to say I am Tiana Brooks. I heard you speak at the Women in Tech conference last year." "Your talk?" She drew a nervous breath. "Change the way I see myself." Olivia smiled. "Oh, really? Thank you, Ms. Brooks." "Yes. I am still in college, majoring in computer science. Working at North Star is just temporary to pay my tuition." Studying and working at the same time, Olivia tilted her head, her gaze softening. "I used to be like you. When I was 20, I wrote code in coffee shops on an old laptop, so slow I had to pray every time I ran a program." They both laughed, and Tiana visibly relaxed. "I did not think you would be this friendly," she admitted. "In the media, they describe you as very strict. The media likes to simplify people. They turn a woman with goals into someone cold. They do not understand that to survive, sometimes women have no choice but to look stronger than they really are." Tiana nodded, her eyes shining. "You are right. Here I also feel out of place. They tell me not to be so sensitive. But there are things you just cannot ignore." Olivia looked at her and saw a reflection of herself 3 decades earlier, a young woman moving through a world that constantly doubted the abilities of women of color. She took a business card from her wallet and quickly wrote a private email address on it with her silver fountain pen. "Send me your resume when you graduate. Carter Dynamics always needs people with a fighting spirit." Tiana received the card with both hands, slightly trembling. Thank you so much." Olivia lightly touched her hand. "Do not just dream of opportunities, create them. And do not let anyone convince you that you are taking up too much space. If anything, take up more." Tiana walked away, glancing back at her several times, as if she had just met a hero. Olivia remained seated, looking at the remaining business cards in her wallet, and smiled faintly. She had once been proud to be a source of inspiration, but now, seeing Tiana, she felt a small ache in her chest, realizing she had lost part of that girl in herself a long time ago. A loud burst of laughter cut across her thoughts. Over by the bar, Charles Whitman was chatting with a group of airline staff. His voice carried all the way to where Olivia was sitting. "I fly this route every week. They know I like seat 1A. I never have to ask." The staff laughed awkwardly. A woman in a company suit added quickly, "Of course, Mr. Whitman. We always prioritize our frequent guests." Olivia watched the scene, her eyes narrowing slightly. She understood the language of power, the way people bowed to money, and the way they bowed to the familiar habits of unfairness. Another staff member stepped up to the counter and made an announcement. "North Star Flight 708 to London will begin boarding in 15 minutes. First-class passengers, please be ready." Olivia closed her laptop and gathered her papers. As she stood, her eyes brushed over Whitman once more. He was gesturing broadly, laughing loudly, completely convinced that the world revolved around him. "The world only gives us the seat it thinks we deserve," Olivia thought. "But only when we stand up does it learn we do not accept its limits." At the boarding gate, Tiana appeared again, guiding passengers with practiced professionalism. When she saw Olivia, she smiled and gave a small nod, a silent greeting. Olivia answered with a warm look. No one knew that in that brief moment, 2 generations of women of color had shared an unspoken promise that wherever they were seated, They would not let others define their worth. In the first-class cabin, Olivia settled into seat 1A and took out her notebook, writing a few quick lines. Under the soft golden light, her handwriting moved slowly, steady, and deliberate. Sometimes we do not need to raise our voice to create change. We only need to stay seated in the place that is rightfully ours and refuse to move. Outside, night slowly descended over Seattle. High above, other planes took off one by one, glowing like fireflies in the dark sky. Olivia did not know that only a few hours later, on this very flight, that belief would be tested, and one simple act, refusing to leave her seat, would turn her into the center of a storm that would force the world to reconsider what the word respect truly means. At the back of the cabin, Tiana was still busy checking seats and adjusting luggage, but her eyes kept drifting toward seat 1A. There, Olivia Carter gently closed her eyes and sighed. Amid the airport noise and the steady rumble of rolling suitcases, she heard a question rising inside her, soft but deep. Have all the years I sacrificed truly bought equality, or only a temporary seat on the flight of the powerful? She did not have an answer. Not yet. But the air itself seemed to be shifting, and with it the fate of a woman named Olivia Carter was also about to take off. The announcement echoed softly through the lounge. North Star Airways flight 708 to London is now boarding. First-class passengers, please proceed to the gate. Olivia Carter closed her laptop and stood up. Every movement she made was precise, almost ceremonial, pulling her suitcase, buttoning her grey blazer, adjusting her watch, and letting a faint, practiced smile cross her lips. But deep in her eyes lingered a stillness, quiet and heavy like the surface of a lake before a storm. She passed through the gate, handing her ticket to the attendant. The young woman smiled. Seat 1, Mrs. Carter. Have a pleasant flight. 1A. A familiar number part of her travel ritual. A small world where she could sit in silence, detached from the noise, working, thinking, existing as a woman who had fought through prejudice to earn her place. She did not know that in just a few minutes, that very seat would become a battleground. The first-class cabin was quiet. Soft white light spilled across rows of plush brown leather seats. Olivia placed her suitcase in the overhead compartment, sat down, and opened her phone to check her London schedule. 7 in the morning, meet the delegation at headquarters. 9 o'clock, meeting with the Trade Department. Everything was organized, structured, perfect, just like her. A flight attendant approached Kelly Adams, her blonde hair tied neatly in a high ponytail, her smile polished to perfection. Good evening, Mrs. Carter. I'm Kelly, your lead flight attendant today. Would you like some champagne before takeoff? Olivia nodded politely. Thank you, Kelly. Kelly's smile didn't waver, but her eyes flicked briefly to the screen of Olivia's ticket. Just a second, but enough to reveal a spark of judgment. Olivia had seen that look thousands of times, the quiet appraisal of a black woman in a first-class seat. She took a sip of champagne and told herself, it's fine. Just another flight. 15 minutes later, as the cabin filled, Olivia heard familiar footsteps in the aisle. A man's voice followed low, confident and slightly too loud. Kelly, you know me seat 1, a same as always. Charles Whitman. He laughed and shook Kelly's hand like they were old friends, then glanced around the cabin. His eyes landed exactly where Olivia was sitting. Oh, seems there's been a little mix-up. Kelly tilted her head slightly, her voice sweet but tense. Yes, Mr. Whitman, it looks like the system double-booked your seat. Please give me a moment, I'll sort it out. Olivia set her champagne glass down. Her voice was calm, but cutting like steel striking the floor. "There's nothing to sort out. This seat is mine. I booked it 3 months ago." Kelly gave an uneasy smile. "Of course I understand, but the corporate office made a special request for Mr. Whitman. He's one of our long-term VIP passengers." "If you don't mind, I do mind," Olivia interrupted. "Very much." The air froze. A few passengers looked up from their laptops. Kelly stood motionless, her professional smile hardening into a mask. "Mrs. Carter," she said softly, "the airline can offer a refund or a voucher. Are you asking me to give up the seat I purchased because a white man usually sits here?" Olivia's tone was even but sharp. "Do you hear yourself? At the front of the cabin." Tiana Brooks, the young flight attendant Olivia had met earlier in the lounge, paused mid-task, her expression tightening. She heard every word, and her heart began to race, not from fear, but from recognition. She had seen this scene before, not with a CEO, but with ordinary people. A black woman told she was in the wrong seat. A passenger denied an upgrade because there were no spots left, even when the seat next to her was empty. She knew how those scenes ended. The weaker person would smile, apologize, and quietly stand up. But Olivia Carter did not stand up. Kelly lowered her voice, trying again. "Mrs. Carter, please, I truly hope you'll cooperate. This is just a small misunderstanding, nothing worth, whose while Kelly Olivia asked, her voice dropping lower, steadier. The person asked to move, or the one who assumes they'll always be accommodated. Whitman stepped in, his tone a mix of embarrassment and irritation. "I don't want to cause trouble. It's just that I always sit here. The airline knows my preferences." Olivia turned toward him, her gaze unwavering. "And the airline knows mine too, 12 years as a platinum member. Yet somehow only one of us is being asked to move. I wonder why that is." Whitman's face reddened. He looked away. The entire cabin was silent. A few minutes later, Captain Scott Mitchell appeared, his stride firm and deliberate. "What's going on here?" Kelly spoke quickly, her voice shaky. "Just a seating mix-up, Captain. Mr. Whitman, not usually," Olivia interjected. "We're talking about a paid reservation, not a habit." Scott checked the passenger list, sighed and said, "Mr. Whitman, seat 2C is available. It's still first class, same legroom. I'd appreciate your cooperation." Whitman pressed his lips together, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine." As he walked past, Olivia caught Kelly's gaze, cold, tense, and quietly resentful. No words were needed. Olivia knew this woman would remember the moment forever. The flight took off 10 minutes late. But in Olivia's mind, time had stopped. She leaned back, eyes closed, listening to the soft vibration of the engines beneath her feet. Something inside her had broken, and yet something else had awakened. Broken from exhaustion, from seeing once again the quiet contempt hidden behind polite professionalism. Awakened because this time she had not stayed silent. Not this time. When the plane leveled out, Tiana approached and whispered softly, "Mrs. Carter, I just wanted to say thank you. If it were me, I think I would have stood up." Olivia opened her eyes and looked at the young woman, her expression softening. "Don't thank me. Just remember, when one person stands up for what's right, the whole system is forced to sit down and listen." Tiana nodded, her eyes glistening. Olivia turned back to her laptop, but instead of opening the London presentation, she opened a blank document and began to type. "There are boundaries we no longer accept, not because we seek to fight, but because we're too tired to pretend everything is fine." She stopped typing and looked out the window. Beneath the thick clouds, Seattle had disappeared. Somewhere in the cabin, Whitman was on the phone, his voice loud, as if nothing had happened. Kelly sat quietly taking notes, avoiding any glance toward seat 1A. Yet something in the air had shifted. Olivia clenched her hand around the armrest, feeling the cold metal beneath her palm. It grounded her. She understood now the real collision wasn't about a seat, but about the idea of who gets to sit where and who's told to move. She didn't know it yet, but in just a few hours this very flight would become the center of global attention, and the small act she had made today would help thousands of people find their own voices again. But for now, as she looked out at the endless stretch of dark ocean below, Olivia Carter had only one thought. I didn't sit down just to fly. I sat down to begin another kind of landing, the collapse of old assumptions about human worth. The Boeing surged forward through the clouds. A new chapter was beginning high above the world, where people believed there was only peace, but hidden within, there was revolution. The lights in the first-class cabin dimmed. The low hum of the engines blended with the soft breathing of sleeping passengers. The whole space sank into a kind of artificial quiet, the kind of silence that only exists when people temporarily forget the things they do not want to face. Olivia Carter was not asleep. She sat upright, laptop open in front of her, the bluish light washing over her face, and making her already resolute features seem even colder. On the screen, a title blinked softly. Letter to the Board of Directors of Carter Dynamics. She typed slowly each word, feeling as if it were carved out of stone. After 30 years of building this company from an old garage in Rainier Valley into a global corporation, I realize I am standing at a crossroads between two paths where success and meaning no longer walk side by side. Her fingers paused. The faint cabin light reflected in her eyes that once burned when she spoke about technology, about innovation, about changing the world. Now in those same eyes there was only exhaustion. She looked out the window. Outside, the ocean was black as ink. At an altitude of 30,000 feet, everything was still, no roads, no borders, no separation. If only the ground were like this, she thought. The scene from earlier replayed in her mind, Kelly's face, straining to hold that fake smile, Whitman's condescending look, and the young, shaken face of Tiana Brooks as she whispered, "If it were me, I think I would have stood up." "No," Olivia murmured. "You do not need to stand up, Tiana, because this time I will not leave my seat." A male flight attendant, Paul Jensen, walked past, checking the rows. Seeing that Olivia was still awake, he stopped and asked politely, "Mrs. Carter, can I get you anything else? Chamomile tea, or perhaps another blanket?" "No, thank you." Paul nodded and moved on, but Olivia noticed his quick glance at her screen. She gave a weary smile. People were always curious when they saw a woman typing in the middle of the night, especially a woman with power. She began to type again. "I have spent my life proving that a black woman can build an empire with her mind without asking anyone for permission. But along that journey, I have slowly lost the very thing that made me begin in the first place, people." The sentence stopped there. People. David's face, her husband, came back to her. His patient eyes laced with disappointment when he said, "You always have a good reason not to be with your family." And Emma, their daughter, who no longer sent messages full of hurt, only short, distant ones. "I get it, Mum. You are busy." She had always believed they understood her. In truth, they had simply given up. Olivia closed her eyes and recalled a day long ago when Emma was still little. She had run into the living room and wrapped her arms around her mother, shouting, "You are my hero." Now that same Emma said to David, "I do not know who Mum is, except what I see in articles online." Olivia typed again. "I have become the woman I once feared most, the one who believes love can wait, that justice can be negotiated, that dignity is a luxury." A hot tear slipped from the corner of her eye and fell onto the keyboard. Olivia gently wiped it away and saw the word "save" glowing in the corner of her screen. Instead of saving, she opened a new file and named it legacy.docx. This time, it was not a resignation letter, but a declaration. Legacy is not the company you leave behind, but the people you inspire to carry the work forward. Tonight I met a young woman, Tiana. She reminded me that the world still needs those who are willing to stand up, even if it is only to say, "I will not give up this seat to anyone." Her hand stilled. Her heart beat slower. Something was shifting inside her, something that had been buried beneath decades of meetings, reports, and stock prices. A soft rustle sounded near the cabin door. Tiana appeared holding a water jug and smiled when she saw Olivia was still awake. "Mrs. Carter, I do not want to disturb you, but thank you for what you did earlier." Olivia looked up. "You are still not asleep." Tiana shook her head lightly. "After seeing what happened, I do not think I can sleep. I saw something I never quite believed could exist, that even when the world tells you to be quiet, someone can still choose to speak." Olivia studied the young woman, her bright eyes full of hunger for something more. "Do not thank me. Promise me this instead. When it is your turn, do not stay silent." "Yes, ma'am." Tiana walked away, leaving a pocket of quiet behind her. Olivia exhaled slowly, as if she had just placed the first brick of something new. She checked her phone and saw a message from Emma sent 3 hours earlier. "I just rewatched your talk from last year. Do you still believe in what you said?" Olivia stared at the text for a long time. She did not reply, but in her heart, the answer was already clear. "Yes, but I forgot how to live in line with it." Outside, the plane rattled gently as it entered a cold air current. A few chimes sounded. Kelly walked through the cabin, checking seat belts, her eyes flicking quickly toward Olivia this time, without indifference but with caution. Olivia understood. That silence was not respect. It was fear. She turned back to her laptop and finished the final lines. "I used to think justice was a grand battle. But sometimes it begins with refusing to move from the seat the world says you do not deserve. Tomorrow when this plane lands, I will decide either I walk away from everything or I begin again for the first time with a real purpose." She pressed save. The screen went dark. In the cabin, the faint nightlight lay across her face. At this height, there were no cities, no voices, no limits, only the endless sky, and a woman asking herself, "If today is the beginning, do I have enough courage to live differently?" Behind her, Whitman laughed loudly, talking about investments and golf. Kelly still laughed along, though her eyes avoided contact. Paul sat down on the jump seat, closing his eyes as if nothing had happened. But in seat 1, a something was rising. Not anger, but awareness. For the first time in many years, Olivia felt herself returning to the true center of who she was. A place without titles, without the word CEO, without pressure, only a human being. The plane jolted hard once more. The warning lights blinked on. Olivia smiled faintly and gripped the armrest. The turbulence was brief, but it reminded her of something to break through the cloud layer a plane has to endure, shaking, and to break through our limits people do too. On the screen, the cursor blinked beside the final line of her letter. Sometimes the bravest thing is not to climb higher, but to pause in the middle of the journey, look around, and realize you have flown too far away from yourself. She pressed save. One last time, then gently closed the laptop. Outside, moonlight spilled across the wing of the aircraft, a quiet glow over a night in which Olivia Carter had just written the opening chapter of her awakening. No one on that flight knew that just a few hours later, the letter written in this silence would become the manifesto of a human-centered revolution sparked by a woman who had finally grown too tired to stay silent. A faint sound came from the galley, blending into the steady hum of the engines. It was close to midnight now. Most of the passengers were asleep. In the first-class cabin, only dim, golden streaks of light remained on the ceiling like distant stars. Olivia Carter was still awake. Her laptop was half closed, her fingertips resting lightly on the cold silver edge. She had just finished writing the letter that would change everything, yet, instead of feeling relief, there was a heaviness in her chest, an unshakable sense of foreboding. From behind her, whispers of an argument broke the stillness. The voices were low but tense enough to make Olivia lift her head. A young woman's voice, strained but trying to stay calm. "Miss Kelly, I'm just saying he shouldn't have. Shh, keep your voice down." Tiana came another voice, sharp and cold. "Kelly Adams." "But this will be handled. I already told you." Olivia narrowed her eyes, closing her laptop and glancing toward the back of the cabin. Under the soft yellow lights, she saw Tiana Brooks, standing upright, her shoulders tight, while Kelly and Paul Jensen, the middle-aged male attendant, blocked the aisle like two cold, silent gates. "Is there a problem?" Olivia's voice was calm, but carried unmistakable authority. The three turned to face her. Kelly forced a strained smile. "Nothing, Mrs. Carter. Just a small misunderstanding." But Tiana shook her head, slightly, her eyes glistening. "It's not a misunderstanding, Mrs. Carter. Mr. Whitman, he touched me when I was pouring his wine. And Miss Kelly told me not to make a scene." The air froze. Paul immediately stepped in, his tone laced with rigid professionalism. "Tiana, I advise you to reconsider your words. Mr. Whitman is a frequent VIP passenger. Do you really want to risk your career over a minor incident?" Olivia stood up. A minor incident. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut through the air. All three froze. "I heard everything she said. And I want to ask, is this North Star's standard procedure to cover up misconduct to keep your VIPs happy?" Kelly inhaled sharply, her practiced smile fading. "Mrs. Carter, I don't have the authority to discipline passengers. Only the captain can make that decision. I just wanted to keep things peaceful." Peaceful for whom, Olivia asked, locking eyes with her. For him, the man with money, or for you, the woman afraid to lose her job? Tiana bit her lip and said softly, "I just want to stay safe. And for Amber, the new attendant. He's worse with her." The name Amber fell like a shard of glass into the silence. Then the captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and deep. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are entering an area of turbulence. Please fasten your seatbelts." Tiana bowed her head. "Excuse me, I need to return to my station." "Wait," Olivia said, her tone low but heavy. "You're not alone." Tiana gave a small nod and quickly walked back to the galley. Olivia sat down and fastened her seatbelt, but her heart wouldn't settle. She knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Less than 5 minutes later, the plane jolted hard. The wine glass on Olivia's table slid, spilling across the surface. A sharp thud came from behind her. Then a man's voice, loud and angry. "What do you think you're doing?" Olivia turned. The scene froze before her eyes like a frame from a film. Amber Lewis, the new flight attendant, stood motionless beside Charles Whitman's seat. Red wine stained her uniform. Her face was pale. Whitman threw up his hands, his voice rising. "You spilled wine on my laptop. Do you have any idea how much that costs? I'm so sorry, sir." The plane shook. Amber's voice trembled. "Shook, what nonsense. You're clumsy and unprofessional. Get your supervisor here. Now I don't pay to be served like this." The first-class cabin turned to look. A few passengers shook their heads. Others pretended to read the familiar apathy of people who wanted to stay uninvolved. Olivia stood up. "Mr. Whitman," she said evenly. "I think you owe her an apology." The cabin went silent. Whitman turned his face, flushed with fury. "Apologize. She poured wine on me because of turbulence," Olivia replied. "I was sitting right here. I saw it. And your reaction goes far beyond what happened." Kelly rushed over, voice high and tense. "Mrs. Carter, please return to your seat. We're handling this." "No, Kelly." Olivia said, her eyes like steel. "You're not handling it. You're burying it." Paul stepped forward, his tone firm. "Mrs. Carter, if you continue to interfere, we'll have to file an incident report for disruptive behavior." Olivia gave a short, cold laugh. "Disruptive? What regulation forbids me from asking a man to show basic decency?" Amber lowered her head, tears falling silently. From the galley, Tiana stood, frozen, her hands gripping the serving tray, too afraid to move. The air in the cabin was thick enough to suffocate. Olivia took a step closer, standing directly in front of Whitman. "I used to think men like you only existed in history books, but it seems some still believe money can buy submission." "Who are you to tell me how to behave?" Whitman snapped. "A witness?" Olivia said, her eyes never wavering. "And someone who refuses to stay silent." The cabin stirred with quiet whispers. A man in row 3 gave a subtle nod. The woman beside him reached for his hand. Kelly turned away, jaw tight. Captain Scott appeared at the front of the cabin, summoning all 3 attendants. Olivia could hear his deep voice, steady but firm. "What's going on here?" Then silence. Then Kelly's voice, clipped and defensive. "Mrs. Carter is interfering with our work. Mr. Whitman lodged a complaint against the crew, and Tiana's voice broke in soft but clear. "No, Captain. Mr. Whitman harassed and verbally abused the attendants. We reported it earlier." A long pause followed. Then Scott's voice came again, low and deliberate. "I'll handle it." 10 minutes later, he returned to the cabin. He approached Olivia quietly and said, "Thank you, Mrs. Carter. I've spoken with the crew. We'll be filing a report on the incident. And I apologize on behalf of the airline." Olivia met his gaze, her tone steady. "I don't need an apology. I need action, and I'll be watching to see if you take it." Scott nodded, a new resolve in his eyes. "We will." As he walked away, Tiana came forward, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you, ma'am. You just saved both me and Amber from losing our jobs." Olivia smiled faintly, her voice warm and low. "No, Tiana. I didn't save anyone. I just reminded everyone that dignity doesn't come with a seat class." After the incident, the cabin sank into a heavy, uneasy silence. Whitman turned toward the window, his face stiff. Kelly sat on the crew bench, avoiding everyone's eyes. Olivia returned to her seat and reopened her laptop. She deleted the last line of her letter and typed a new one. Sometimes a small act can shake an entire system. Not because it's loud, but because it wakes up the souls that have grown too used to bowing. She looked at the words and smiled softly. Outside the window, the black ocean below began to fade, replaced by the faint glow of approaching dawn. Olivia whispered quietly, "Perhaps after all the sky is grateful for turbulence." And somewhere in that cabin, those who had stayed silent began to think about fairness, about respect, and about the woman sitting in seat 1A who had just taught them a lesson without raising her voice. No one has the right to make you leave the seat that rightfully belongs to you. Dawn began to break, peeking through the thick layers of cloud. The first light streamed into the first-class cabin, like a thin veil of smoke slipping through the window and falling across the calm face of Olivia Carter. She had not slept. The night had felt longer than any transatlantic flight she had ever taken, not because of time, but because of what had been shifting inside her. She had witnessed something undeniable, that truth only needs a single moment to shatter the artificial wall of so-called professionalism. All it takes is one person brave enough to say enough. Soft footsteps sounded at the front of the cabin. Captain Scott Mitchell was making his way down the aisle. He stopped at seat 1A, his posture steady, his eyes carrying something different this time, no longer just formality, but sincerity. "Mrs. Carter," he began, his voice low. "And even, may I speak with you in private for a minute?" Olivia nodded and unfastened her seatbelt. They moved to the small area between the cabin and the cockpit, where a faint green light cast a pale glow on the floor. Scott drew a breath. "I have spoken with the crew, with Kelly, with Paul, and with Miss Brooks. I have also spoken to Mr. Whitman." Olivia folded her arms and stayed silent. She did not need to say anything. Scott paused, then corrected himself. Mr. Whitman did not deny what happened. He said it was just his way of being friendly. "I have filed an incident report. When we land, the airline's human resources department will take over. But there is something you should know." Scott met her gaze, his voice dropping slightly. "This is not the first time. At least 3 flight attendants have reported similar behavior from him, but the reports were blocked at the regional management level. I only found out this morning when I checked the system." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "And what did they do about it?" Scott gave a small, bitter smile. "Nothing. Because that passenger is connected to the North Star Board of Directors." A chill seemed to pass through the air. Olivia felt as if even the atmosphere itself were ashamed. "You know," she said slowly, "people usually imagine injustice as a heavy punch. In truth, it is more like a leak in the hull, quiet and patient, and eventually it rots the entire ship." Scott said nothing for a moment, then exhaled. "I agree. And maybe I have been silent for too long as well." "You have 3 daughters, do you not?" Olivia asked, remembering the family photo he kept beside his nameplate in the cockpit. Scott nodded. "Yes. And tonight, I kept asking myself if they were in Tiana's place or Amber's place, who would stand up for them." In that moment, Olivia realized it was not only Tiana or Amber learning how to find their voices. The man standing in front of her was learning too. Mrs. Carter Scott continued, "What you did last night, it made me think. You may not know it, but when you stood up, the whole cabin went quiet. Not because they were afraid, but because they saw something they had forgotten, that you can say no, that you do not have to apologize for protecting what is right." Olivia smiled faintly, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Sometimes what we call courage is nothing more than exhaustion. I am simply too tired to keep pretending everything is fine. Whatever the reason, Scott said, you woke a lot of people up. He paused, looking toward the window, where the morning light was beginning to spill in. I have sent my report directly to the airline's board. I do not know what will happen, but I know this. I cannot look the other way anymore. Olivia nodded. You have just taken off for the first time without needing an airplane captain. When they returned to the cabin, Tiana was helping Amber clear the last of the glasses. Both of them looked up, their eyes meeting Olivia's full of gratitude and searching for something solid to hold on to. Olivia walked over and asked gently, "Are you both all right?" Amber nodded, her voice shaky but firm. "I am all right." "Thank you for not letting it slide." Olivia smiled. "Do not thank me. Thank yourself for staying through the night without walking away from this job." Tiana looked at her, her eyes bright like a small flame. "You know, the whole crew in the back has heard about what happened. Someone recorded the moment you spoke to Mr. Whitman. They said it is the first time they have seen a passenger stand up for them like that." Olivia paused. "Recorded," Tiana nodded. "Just a few seconds. But I think it is already being shared in the airline's internal group." A familiar feeling rose in Olivia's chest, unclear but powerful. She did not know yet that a few hours from now that very clip would shake the skies in a very real way. When Olivia returned to her seat, sunlight was pouring into the cabin. She opened her laptop again and looked at the last line in the document called legacy.docx. Then she began to type. The strength of leadership does not lie in giving orders, but in the ability to help others dare to believe in what is right. If anyone ever reads these words, remember this. Sometimes a single lone voice is enough to make the sky tremble. She saved the file, closed her eyes, and rested her head against the seat. The steady thrum of the engines sounded like a heartbeat. A moment later, the intercom crackled, and Scott's calm voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent. Our estimated arrival time in London, Heathrow, is 7:42 in the morning. The weather is clear and beautiful." Olivia opened her eyes and looked out the window. The golden light of dawn exploded across the wings of the aircraft. Below the surface of the sea shimmered as if it had been covered in gold leaf. Kelly walked by and paused briefly next to her seat. She bowed her head slightly and said quietly, "Mrs. Carter, I am sorry. I was wrong not to stand up for my own crew." Olivia looked at her and saw that Kelly's eyes were red. She gave a small nod, her tone softening. "What matters is that you realized it, while you still have the chance to make it right." Kelly nodded and walked away. It was a late apology, but a genuine one. For Olivia, it was enough to believe the world was still capable of healing itself. As the plane continued its descent, Tiana passed by and leaned in to straighten Olivia's tray table. She spoke softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The captain spoke to the entire crew. He said that from now on, if any passenger harasses staff, even a VIP, we have the right to report directly to the cockpit. We do not have to go through the lead attendant anymore. Olivia looked up and met the young woman's radiant smile. "Good. Hold on to that. Do not let it stay just a policy, make it a culture." Tiana nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, ma'am." The chime for prepare for landing sounded. Olivia tightened her seatbelt. When the wheels touched the runway, she drew her first deep breath in many hours. Not because all her worries were gone, but because she knew that the battle inside her had finally landed. From deep within a quiet but resolute voice spoke Olivia, "This is not an ending. This is a new departure gate. As the cabin door opened, passengers began to file out. At the exit, Captain Scott Mitchell stood by to say goodbye, his expression solemn. When Olivia approached, he extended his hand. "Thank you truly. What happened last night, it will not be buried." Olivia shook his hand and smiled. "If you ever need someone to remind them of that, you know where to find me." Scott replied, his voice steady. "Yes, and I think the world will soon know as well." Olivia stepped out of the jet bridge and into the cool early morning air of London. In her hand, the laptop felt heavier than usual, not because of its metal, but because of what it now carried inside. Above her, the sky over the airport blazed with bright morning light, fierce and radiant like a promise that dawn always follows the darkest night. She did not yet know that somewhere in the vast web of the internet, a 3-minute video from the first-class cabin was beginning to spread. And within 24 hours it would ignite a movement known as the Dignity Initiative. For now, as she walked through the terminal, Olivia Carter knew only one thing. Some flights end on the runway, but there are flights that truly begin the moment we dare to say enough. Heathrow Airport was crowded in the early morning. Streams of people flowed like silver currents under the lights, reflecting off the marble floor. Olivia Carter walked through the crowd with her usual calm composure, but inside a storm was stirring. Her phone buzzed continuously, message after message lighting up the screen. From her assistant, Lauren Perez, Mrs. Carter. "Have you seen the news?" Olivia frowned. "What news?" She unlocked her phone, and her heart skipped a beat. On the screen, the headline read, "First-class passenger defends flight attendant from harassment. CEO of Carter Dynamics identified in viral video." Below it, a 3-minute video, filmed inside the first-class cabin of North Star Flight 708. In it, Olivia was standing, her voice calm yet razor-sharp. "Dignity is not a privilege, it is a fundamental human right." That sentence, clear and unwavering, echoed through the soft cabin lights and the hum of the engines. The comment section below exploded like fireworks. She spoke for all of us. This is why women need seats at the table. Respect has no class. Within 6 hours, the video had reached over 3 million views. Olivia stopped in the middle of the concourse, her eyes fixed on the screen. No one paid attention to the woman in a grey coat, her silver hair neatly tied back, standing frozen in the flow of moving people, as if time itself had paused around her. Another message appeared from Lauren. "North Star Airlines is in crisis. Staff at airports in New York, Dallas, and Chicago just walked off the job. They're calling it the Dignity Walkout." Olivia read it twice. A strange feeling swept over her, half disbelief, half awe. The story of one first-class cabin had gone beyond the skies, touching the ground, touching thousands of silent injustices. At the arrivals area, Jason Miller, the European branch director of Carter Dynamics, stood waiting with a bouquet of flowers, his face bright with a practiced smile. "Olivia, welcome to London." She nodded, masking the turmoil inside. "Thank you, Jason. I need a car to the hotel, immediately." Jason quickly grabbed her suitcase, unable to hide his curiosity. "Good flight. I heard there was a bit of an incident." Olivia looked at him, her expression calm but chilling. "It was fine. Perfectly fine." They rode in silence. Only the constant vibration of Olivia's phone filled the air calls from journalists, partners, even human rights organizations. When they arrived at the hotel, Lauren called via video. Her eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, her voice trembling between excitement and panic. "Mrs. Carter, You're becoming a symbol. The press is calling you the voice of the skies. But more than that, North Star just released an apology promising a full investigation, and what their CEO, Stephen Grant, wants to meet you immediately, in private. Olivia froze. Grant, the famously stoic man who almost never appeared in public, wanted to meet her. All right, arrange it. 2 hours later, in a private conference room on the top floor of the hotel, Olivia sat across from Stephen Grant at a polished oak table. He was about her age, his face carrying the weary lines of someone who had once believed power could control everything. "Mrs. Carter," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "I owe you an apology. On behalf of the airline, and on behalf of myself." Olivia studied him, saying nothing. "Your video grant continued was a wake-up call, not just for North Star, but for the entire aviation industry. I just finished a board meeting. We've decided to launch a full reform of our behavioral and grievance policies, effective immediately." Reform Olivia's tone was cool. "I hope that's not just a public relations slogan." Grant met her gaze. "It's not. I want you to help make it real. I'm asking you to serve as an independent advisor to our ethics board to directly oversee the changes." For a moment, time seemed to slow. Opportunity, responsibility, and the weight that came with both. "Aren't you afraid I'll embarrass your company?" she asked. Grant gave a faint, tired smile. "My company has already been embarrassed. Now I want to help it regain its soul." The conversation lasted more than an hour. They spoke about human rights, employee protection mechanisms, and corporate culture. When it ended, Grant stood and extended his hand. "Thank you, Olivia. You didn't just save an airline, you're helping the world remember how to treat one another." Olivia shook his hand, her voice steady. "I didn't save anyone. I just said what should have been said long ago." Back in her room, Olivia opened the window and looked out at London, bathed in the morning sun. The light glinted off the glass towers, scattering into thousands of golden fragments, like pieces of hope awakening after a long night. She opened her laptop, found the file legacy.docx, and began to type. Sometimes change doesn't begin in grand halls or official resolutions. It begins with one act of courage at the right moment, one person refusing to bow one sentence that makes the world stop and listen. I didn't find justice on the ground, but perhaps I met it among the clouds. Her phone rang again. It was Lauren. "Mrs. Carter, you need to return to Seattle immediately. The Carter Dynamics Board has called an emergency meeting. The video's gone global. The company's being mentioned everywhere. Some people are praising you, others are criticizing. Stocks are up 4%. But the financial press is calling your actions impulsive." Olivia closed her eyes. "Book me the earliest flight." "I'm coming back," Lauren hesitated. "Are you sure the media will swarm you?" Olivia opened her eyes and looked straight into the mirror. "If I had the courage to stand up in first class, I can stand in my own boardroom." The next morning in Heathrow's VIP lounge, Olivia sat quietly waiting for her flight back to Seattle. The television on the wall was broadcasting live footage, hundreds of airline employees in New York, Chicago, and Toronto, holding signs that read, "Respect takes flight." The news anchor spoke, "The Dignity Initiative movement, started by North Star employees, has now spread to 18 other airlines. Olivia Carter is being hailed as the symbol of human dignity in action." Olivia watched the screen and smiled, not a proud smile, but the smile of someone who had finally found meaning in her scars. A service attendant approached softly. "Mrs. Carter, Your flight is ready." Olivia stood pulling her suitcase behind her. Outside, the light filtered through the clouds, reflecting off the glass panels the same kind of light that had shone through the window on that fateful flight. Only this time, she wasn't flying away from something. She was flying toward it, to face it, and perhaps to begin something greater than anything she had ever imagined. Because sometimes the turbulence in the sky isn't an accident. It's the universe's way of waking up those who have been silent for too long. As the North Star jet touched down in Seattle, the afternoon sun poured through the glass, golden and blinding. On the runway, dozens of reporters and cameras were already waiting. Olivia Carter stepped out amid a storm of flashing lights, each burst like the beat of a drum, marking the beginning of a new battle. Lauren ran toward her, breathless. "The board is waiting at headquarters. They want you to explain yourself." Olivia nodded, her gaze steady. "There's nothing to explain, Lauren. Only the truth." On the drive back, the radio was filled with news reports. The hashtag Dignity Initiative has surpassed 50 million shares. Major corporations are now being urged to review their internal workplace cultures. Olivia looked out the window and saw crowds gathered outside the gates of her company, holding up signs that read, "Respect is power," and "Olivia, we stand with you." She smiled faintly. The storm the world was talking about wasn't a crisis. It was an awakening. And for the first time in many years, Olivia Carter felt no fear. Because this time, she knew this storm wasn't meant to destroy. It was meant to wash away what was old and make room for a new sky. The conference room on the 40th floor was brightly lit, yet the air felt heavy. 12 board members sat in silence, their eyes fixed on Olivia Carter, the woman who had become the center of the world's attention. CFO Rob Hayes stood up, his tone sharp and accusing. "You've dragged this company into a media storm. Do you have any idea what the consequences are?" Olivia calmly opened her laptop and projected the screen onto the wall. The company's stock had risen by 7%. Website traffic had quadrupled, and hundreds of thousands of job applications had poured in within just 24 hours. "These are not consequences," she said, her voice low and steady. "They're proof that people will always gravitate toward what is real and meaningful." The room went completely still. After a few seconds, Rob sank back into his seat, lowering his head. Olivia closed her laptop and turned to the window, gazing at the Seattle skyline, where digital billboards were glowing with the words, "Dignity Initiative." She understood now the world had changed, and so had she. "Carter Dynamics will no longer just sell technology," she said. "We will spread a culture of respect." As she stepped out of the boardroom, Olivia looked up at the clear blue sky. For the first time in years, her heart felt light. The battle was over, and dignity had taken flight. From the perspective of a leadership ethics expert, Olivia Carter's journey is more than the story of a CEO. It is proof that dignity is the truest form of power. When one person dares to stand up for what is right, the entire system is forced to change. Because respect doesn't need noise, it only needs action. If you believe that respect can change the world, hit like to spread this message and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories about justice and humanity. And leave a comment below. Keep respect.